Hello everyone and welcome back to Mikey Reacts. Today we've got a great one for you. We recently did the Revolutionary War in the North, the animated battle map that is brought out from the American Battlefield Trust. I think they do absolutely amazing work. I love their website. You get lots of information on American battlefields over the centuries. This is going to be a great one. We did the North already. Today we're doing the South. I do hear that the war in the South was actually more brutal than the war in the North because there were factions of loyalists and those who wanted independence fighting each other, many of whom fought together in the Indian Wars. So it should be very, very interesting, and I want to know more about it. I don't know how much about it will talk. I don't know how much about it will talk about, but hopefully any missing information we can do our research and we can have a look at. Let's have a look at this. We'll get to it. Don't forget though, before you do anything, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. If you hit the notification bell, you won't miss out on any new videos that come out every single week. In fact, we do at least one video per day at this rate. So subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and check out the description of this video. You'll find my Patreon link, my Twitter and my Instagram. Patreon is just $5 per month. You get lots of videos that you're not going to find here on YouTube. They're exclusive only to Patreon, and it's only $5 per month. So let's get to this.
April 19th, 1775. A shot rings out on Lexington Green. America's war for independence has begun. The eyes of the world are focused on New England, but the clouds of war sweep across the South. In South Carolina, Patriot troops seize Fort Charlotte on the Savannah River and drive Georgia's loyal governor from Savannah after the Battle of the Rice Boats. The British are driven from Virginia at the Battle of Great Bridge. Emboldened by their success, South Carolinians establish a constitution to govern the colony independently from King George. In North Carolina, citizens of Mecklenburg County reject the rule of Parliament and the Crown, while the Halifax resolves direct the North Carolina delegation to the Continental Congress to advocate for independence. But liberty is not the desire of every Southern colonist. South Carolina is the most politically divided. The Low Country, including the major port of Charleston, is a Patriot stronghold, while the Back Country is home to a mixture of both those loyal to the British Crown and to those who want independence. The opposing elements clash in backcountry battles. The first land battle of the South occurs at 96 in November of 1775, where a loyalist militia besieges a Patriot garrison. In North Carolina, loyalist recruiting is aflame. On February 27, 1776, Patriot forces fight and crush the Loyalists in the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge, a demoralizing defeat for the British that effectively ended Loyalist activity in North Carolina for years. In June 1776, the British, led by Sir Henry Clinton and Sir Peter Parker, tried but failed to capture Charleston by land and sea in the Battle of Sullivan's Island. Meanwhile, the colonists declare their independence while the revolution rages in the North.
Sorry to pause it, but that just was what I was saying in the introduction. That shows that South Carolina was heavily divided. I didn't know it was specifically South Carolina, but I did know there was a lot more division in the South, so that's really interesting to hear from this perspective, from this source.
General George Washington's forces capture Boston, while New York and Philadelphia fall to the British. Half of America's best ports lay in British hands. Stalemate grips the North. At the end of 1778, the British undertake a Southern strategy, a concentrated effort to subdue the Southern colonies. Should the British have to sue for peace, they prefer to do so with the prosperous Southern colonies under their control. Rice, indigo, cotton, and other cash crops abound in the South, crops that cannot be produced in the British Isles. The High Command, too, is convinced that thousands of loyalists await their return. By securing the South, the British hope to cut the colonies in two, leave the northern colonies to their own devices, and control the prosperous South. The first blows fall in Georgia. The British capture Savannah and gain a deep water base of operations. Patriot forces counter with the decisive victory at the Battle of Kettle Creek, but it is not enough. In March 1779, the British win at Briar Creek, effectively subduing Patriot forces in Georgia. In April 1779, the British again try to capture Charleston, but are deterred by the arrival of Continental reinforcements. Patriot General Benjamin Lincoln attacks the British rear guard at the Battle of Stono Ferry, but is repulsed. In September 1779, a combined force of French and Continentals set their sights on British-held Savannah, where a lengthy siege and costly assault only end in repulse.
I find it interesting that they're talking about how prosperous the South was. Of course, as you know, as the Industrial Revolution came about, and the South was still reduced to mostly farming, and the North, in the North, there were the growth of cities and stock markets and more sort of modern forms of business that we see today, as opposed to agriculture, which is more traditional form of feeding and making money. We obviously saw the North gain more power and more prosperity, but it's very interesting to see that when the states were colonies, even way into the 1800s, the South was far more prosperous because of its rich agricultural ability and the fertile soil that it had. So that's very, very interesting to know.
The momentum shifts to the British, who again turn their attention to Charleston. Sir Henry Clinton sails from New York to command the attack. By April 1780, the British have laid siege, and the city capitulates on May 12th, resulting in the largest surrender of American forces during the war. In the aftermath, a Patriot relief column bound for Charleston is massacred by Lieutenant Colonel Bannister Tarleton in the Battle of Waxhaws. The war had reached a new and bloody phase. With the Continental Command structure in tatters, the South Carolina Patriots fight a partisan war to disrupt British and Loyalist forces. These partisans, commanded by such men as Francis Marion, Thomas Sumter, Andrew Pickens, Elijah Clark, and William Davie, harass and ambush British forces at every opportunity.
So I'm assuming Thomas Sumter, that was what Fort Sumter was, who Fort Sumter was named after. I'm assuming, obviously, which was the place where the very beginning catalytic battle of the Civil War began.
With the capture of Charleston, Clinton returns to New York, leaving Lord Charles Cornwallis in command to finish the subjugation of the southern colonies. The Continental Congress sends General Horatio Gates to the south with a fresh army to stem the British tide. Cornwallis and Gates clash at Camden, South Carolina, where the Continentals suffer a terrible defeat. For the second time in 97 days, and for the third time in the last 20 months, the Patriots have no regular army in the South, but motivated Patriot militias remain. From his headquarters in Camden, South Carolina, Cornwallis sends Major Patrick Ferguson west to recruit and train Loyalists. Tired of the Patriots' backcountry raids, Ferguson decrees that he will hang their leaders and lay their country waste with fire and sword if the over-mountain men did not lay down their arms. This infuriates the backcountry over-mountain men, who set out over the mountains to confront Ferguson and his army of Loyalists. They stop at a place called the Cowpens on October 6th, kill a couple of beef cattle and refresh themselves. At dusk, 910 of the men with the best horses push on toward Kings Mountain, where they heard they would find Ferguson. On October 7th, they envelop the steep base of Kings Mountain and close in on Ferguson's unsuspecting army. At 3 p.m., they attack, firing uphill from the cover of the mountain's boulders and trees. Many of the Over-Mountain men recognize the faces of family and neighbors in the harried ranks of the Carolina Loyalists. Major Patrick Ferguson, the only British officer present, declares that God himself would not remove him from that mountain. Ferguson is killed during the battle, and at least 8 Loyalists are hanged, punctuating the risk of loyalty to the crown. That same month, George Washington appoints Nathaniel Greene to command the army in the Southern Department. Greene divides his army and sends General Daniel Morgan to the west to spirit up the people and to protect that part of the country. This forces Cornwallis to split his army, and he sends Lieutenant Colonel Bannister Tarleton west to protect the entire 96th district and the Star Fort. When Morgan hears that Tarleton is heading his way, he decides to meet him at a well-known pasturing area called the Cowpens, the same place where the Over-Mountain men had stopped before going to Kings Mountain. Morgan makes an unconventional move and splits his force into 3 main lines of defense and puts the militia in the first 2 lines, with the Continentals in the 3rd line and the Dragoons in reserve. On the morning of January 17th, 1781, Tarleton's force charges. The 1st, then 2nd lines of Patriots withdraw. The British then charge the 3rd line, but soon find themselves ensnared in a double envelopment as the withdrawing Patriots reappear on their left and right flank.
Wow.
In less than 30 minutes, a significant portion of Cornwallis's army is destroyed. Greene then...
This must be the inspiration for the movie The Patriot. That sounds like exactly the final battle that happened in the movie The Patriot. If you guys remember the movie, we had the militiamen at the front, the Continental Army behind, and then they kept retreating and reloading until the battle was won. That's very interesting.
Adopts a strategy of exhaustion. He moves towards the Dan River on the North Carolina-Virginia border, wearing the British down along the way, pulling them further from their supply base. In the race to the Dan, Patriots used numerous fords and ferries to keep the British guessing. An exhausted British army watches Greene escape across the Dan River intact. The British turn toward Hillsborough, North Carolina, while Greene's revitalized army recrosses the Dan in pursuit. The armies meet in battle at Guilford Courthouse, and Cornwallis would later write that during the battle, the Americans fought like demons. The British win the battle, but suffer more casualties than the Americans, which causes Charles James Fox to state in Parliament that another such victory would destroy the British army. The British fall back toward Wilmington, clearing the way for Greene to retake the Carolinas. On April 25, 1781, near Camden, South Carolina, Greene's forces are bested at the Battle of Hobkirk's Hill. Although a tactical victory for the British, it serves as a strategic victory for the Patriots. From May 22nd to June 19, 1781, Greene, with 1,000 Patriot troops, stages the longest field siege of the Revolutionary War against 550 Loyalists who are defending 96 from an earthen star fort. Under the direction of Polish freedom fighter Colonel Thaddeus Kosciuszko, the chief engineer of the Patriot Army, the Patriots began digging a mine underneath the Star Fort, planning to pack it with gunpowder and blow it up, thus allowing the Patriots to storm the Loyalist-held Star Fort. However, after dark on June 9, 1781, a small group of Loyalists attacked the Patriot sappers digging the mine. Despite multiple raids, the Patriots continue work on the mine throughout the siege. Then, Greene receives news that British reinforcements are on their way. Time and British troops would soon be closing in on him. On June 18th, Greene makes one last assault on the fort. The attack is a failure, and Greene withdraws his army from 96. Both sides claim victory at Eutaw Springs, South Carolina, on September 8, 1781. But the British casualties are so great, they again withdraw to the Charleston area. Meanwhile, Cornwallis decides to open a final campaign in Virginia to change the odds in his favor. There, the British could receive faster reinforcements and supplies from the British stronghold in New York City, while driving the fight inland to separate the northern and southern colonies. Petersburg, Richmond, Portsmouth, and Norfolk fall into British hands. Cornwallis nearly destroys a force under the command of Washington's protege, the Marquis de Lafayette, at the Battle of Green Spring. By September of 1781, Cornwallis is encamped near Yorktown.
Yeah.
Sensing that Cornwallis had backed himself into a corner, a combined American and French force, led by General Washington, rushes to Virginia in hopes of boxing in the British from the landward side, while a fleet of French ships seals off the British from the sea. French and American forces captured key British redoubts to seal their siege lines. After 3 weeks of siege operations, Cornwallis capitulates on October 19th, 1781.
And that was it, I believe.
The war continues for nearly 2 more years.
Oh, really?
But the major fighting is over. The British evacuate Charleston on December 14th, 1782. The Treaty of Paris officially ends the American Revolution on September 3rd, 1783.
Okay.
Perhaps Nathaniel Greene best summarized the character of the Southern Patriots. We fight, get beat, rise, and fight again. This tenacious attitude ultimately secured America's independence on the numerous battlefields of the South. There is no American land more hallowed and more essential to telling the American story of liberty and freedom than these battlegrounds.
Wow. That's really interesting. What I find very interesting more than anything was the fact that I can't remember which battle it was. The battle at anyway, where they were fighting up the hill, and they noticed the faces of family members and friends fighting for the loyalists, and those fighting, of course, fighting for the Continental Army or the Continental Militia at the time, and they saw each other's faces and they almost knew each other, but the fighting had to go on. That's very profound. There's a lot to unpack there. You can see very much that the war in the South was a bit more it seemed as though it was a bit more fast-paced and a bit more dynamic than the war in the North. I think a big part of that is the fact that there were more loyalists in the South, and there was more division amongst societies, amongst individuals, than there was in the North. I think in the North it was mostly militiamen and the Continental Army versus the British Army, the conventional British Army. But in the South you had also loyalist militia, which was fighting. They were fighting amongst each other. So that can be that would really increase the dynamism of the war, being that there were probably, aside from these major battles, there were probably far more skirmishes in small towns and just outside of small towns amongst men who were once brothers and once fought together, and now they're fighting against each other, some for the British Empire and some for freedom, which seemed very interesting to me. I struggled to understand why there were so many loyalists, but at the same time you can kind of appreciate that in their minds they were at the time British and they wanted to remain British despite the fact that they weren't getting the representation they deserved. So I kind of understand that to a certain extent, and there is a certain fear that comes with fighting for your freedom or being free from the British Empire. I appreciate that kind of fear, where actually that's all you've known for your entire life, or for the entire existence of the colonies. What would we do without being under British rule, or being at least a member of the British Empire? What could come after that? And that, I understand that fear. It's a very valid fear. I think, however, that fear stopped a lot of people from wanting their freedom from the British Empire, and that's where you've got that clash and that loyalty to the British Empire, which is more so seen in the southern states, or what would become the southern states after, of course, the war was over. What I find interesting is the fact that not necessarily taught. I personally thought Yorktown was really the final nail in the coffin for the British Empire on American soil. Now, it was the last major battle, as it does say here, but I was not aware, well, to a certain extent, I was not aware that the war actually did continue for another 2 years before the treaty was signed. I knew the treaty was signed in '83, but I wasn't aware of the fact that there were still pockets of fighting happening in what was then, well, about to become the United States. After Yorktown, I thought the Yorktown was really the complete end, although I have now discovered that it was the last major engagement. However, there were other minor and smaller pockets of fighting throughout the land afterwards, which is obviously why the treaty was signed in '83, and then the United States became the United States. Now, I find that very, very interesting. There's a lot there's very, very interesting, the tactics, newer tactics being created. I also find interesting, now I know it's a really, really weird thing to think about, but this is 1770s and 80s, and the war seemed a lot more dynamic. I know it is two sides facing off at each other and taking as many shots as they possibly can, but it seemed as though the fighting was more dynamic, there was more movement, less stagnation than something like the First World War, which actually seemed more archaic than the type of fighting that was happening here. Of course, the type of fighting with muskets and cold steel was very brutal, in that musket balls are something ridiculous, like large, I think they're like 63 caliber or something ridiculous like that, because their size was like that. So there was really no surviving. If you got shot in the arm, you lost your arm. So very interesting here. Of course, the American history is very dynamic, very explosive. It started out in an explosive manner with the Revolutionary War, and then it continued on to the Civil War and so on and so forth. Or you even had the War of 1812 prior to Civil War, which I've done a video on the Battle of Baltimore. If you guys want to check it out, I have some interesting thoughts on that, because the video that is commonly seen on YouTube, many disagree with it, many agree with it, and it's very much a contentious issue. So that was really interesting, guys. Thank you very much. I have some more thoughts on this, and I'll write them down and create another video dedicated to sort of unpacking this a little bit more. But for now, this is my reaction to this video. I found it very interesting. I thought I knew plenty about the American Revolutionary War. Apparently, there are certain aspects of it that I really did miss, and I'm not really too familiar on individual battlefields and battlegrounds. Maybe a few, of course. Yorktown, no one can, everyone will know the Battle of Yorktown. But certain smaller pockets of fighting, certain smaller battles that occurred throughout the American Revolution, I was very unaware of, and this really brought them to light for me, and I really do enjoy learning about new stuff, so this is actually really, really great. So, like I said, I enjoy history. I'm not a history expert, especially not an American history expert, but it's something that fascinates me greatly and has done for the last 3 or 4 years, and I do as much reading as I possibly can into it. But looking at videos like this that really increase my knowledge, it may really open my mind to sort of broader perspectives of everything that's happened in American history, especially during the Revolutionary War in this case. And I actually happen to know more about the Civil War than I did the Revolutionary War, which it's kind of weird that I'm going backwards. But really interesting stuff, guys. Thank you very much for you guys who recommended this video. I really like the American Battlefield Trust. They do really, really great work. They're very informative. And the fact that this is an animated map, and there's also cinematic aspects of it, which they've obviously filmed through great lengths, is really, really impressive, and I absolutely love it. It doesn't have that many views. It has 150,000 views, but absolutely great. So, guys, thank you very, very much. I hope I see you on the next video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And for you guys who are on Patreon, this is being made for Patreon, but this may be posted, this may be the short version that's posted onto YouTube, with an exception of the analysis that I'll post only on Patreon. So for those of you on Patreon, thank you very much for your subscriptions. And for those of you on YouTube, thank you very much for watching this. If you're not subscribed already, please feel free to. And if you want to see the longer analysis of this video, go ahead, head over to Patreon. It's just $5 per month, and you can see exactly how I feel step by step about this video. So thank you very much, guys. I'll see you on the next one.